have a better understanding of how to advise and how to navigate and what you should be saying.
Yeah, and I've seen it where agents are confidently wrong. And they think they're
dangerous.
They're so sure that they know.
Again, is there an open door, right? Can I enroll into Medicare, or do I have to wait? If I have to wait, are there penalties? It's a domino effect, right? And so I think it's just super important to make sure that we're asking the right questions.
Hey everybody, welcome to Medicare Agent IQ. I am Raul Gonzalez.
And I'm Oscar Ibieta.
And today, I was kind of thinking about this, and I was reminded of a situation that kind of came up the other day, a while back, where I was speaking with somebody who needed to sign up for Medicare Part B. It was a veteran, and he was told by an insurance agent that he did not need to sign up for Medicare Part B because he had creditable coverage in VA coverage. So he goes through and for 8 years, he was on just original Medicare and would just use his VA coverage. And then he had kind of like, I think it was like cancer or something. He ended up having to go and get a second opinion. And he tried to sign up for Medicare Part B and then was surprised that he ended up having to have a late enrollment penalty. And he was like really upset.
Worth.
Yeah. And what is that? 80%?
Yeah.
So he was really frustrated, and it was the biggest frustration is that he had this conversation with a Medicare insurance agent and was given the wrong information. And that's kind of what we want to talk about today is just kind of, so what we'll do is we'll have days where we teach marketing and then days where we just kind of go back to the basics on the basics of Medicare and how it works and really educating yourself as an insurance agent and making sure that you aren't giving people wrong information that give them a lifetime penalty of 80% of the Medicare Part B premium. So that's what we're going to be going over today is when a client should actually sign up for Medicare. And it's confusing. You know, a lot of times agents are, they are sitting with someone who is still working or they're just turning 65. Like we've said before, more and more seniors are deciding that they're going to keep working for 2 years because retirement age is now 67, right? And so more and more we're seeing people choosing to stay working. So the question is, well, if I'm going to be working, I have access to this employer coverage, should I enroll into Medicare Part B? Should I enroll in a Medicare Advantage plan? What should I do? And I think a lot of agents just don't know what they should do, right?
Yeah, I think, it probably has a lot to do with maybe they're not asking the right questions, or they're not asking all the questions, or there are some assumptions that are made when these conversations come up. And so we as agents have to be prepared. We have to know what questions we need to be asking and try to uncover, in that discovery, that initial phone call or meeting that you have with the individual, you want to uncover as much information as you can. And I think sometimes we can just be quick, agents can be quick to give their expertise and say, I'm the expert here. Here's what we're going to do. But really, you have to take the time to uncover a lot of information, and then you'll have a better understanding of how to advise and how to navigate and what you should be saying. Yeah,
and I've seen it where agents are confidently wrong. And they think they're
dangerous.
They're so sure that they know, and then they're like, oh man, I was given the wrong information all this time. And so we want to make sure that we avoid that. So today we're just going to kind of go over a couple of scenarios to make sure that all agents that listen to Medicare Agent IQ, any agent that's affiliated with our agency and that also listen to this, that they will not give that wrong information as they go through. So let's go kind of like with the first scenario would be, and this is kind of an easier one. So Oscar, you get a phone call from an agent, from a senior, and that senior tells you, hey, Oscar, I got your number. I was given your information. I am an employee at a large company, insert large company, one of those major companies, or even like a grocery store chain, right? I'm an employee there. I'd like to meet. I'm planning on continuing to work until I'm 67 at retirement age. Do I even need to talk to you? Do I need to sign up for Medicare?
Yeah, so the response should always look something like this. We should absolutely have a conversation, have a meeting, and see if it's going to make sense for you to take Medicare or not. And the reason behind that, I always remind seniors, look, you've paid into this system for the last X amount of years that you've been working. You've always seen that Medicare deduction come right out of your paycheck. We pay into the system, right? I'm not even on Medicare, but I pay into the system. We all pay into the system. So it's something that you are entitled to. It's something that you've earned, and it's absolutely something that we need to look at, because now that it's a real option on the table for you, we've got to see whether or not it makes sense. And sometimes it does. There are times when I sit down with somebody and it ends up making sense for them to stay on their coverage with their employer. But then other times we discover that it makes more sense. It's going to be more beneficial for them to go ahead and enroll into Medicare. So yes, absolutely, we should at least sit down and have a conversation and see if it's going to make sense for you to enroll into Medicare, or to just hold off, delay it, and go ahead and enroll into and keep your employer's coverage.
Yeah, there's no one size fits all approach to this. And that's the thing that kind of bothers me sometimes when I talk to agents, and you'll have these conversations with agents and they'll say, oh, I don't deal with it. If someone's still working and they're at a large employer, I try to get that done over the phone, and I get to the bottom of it right there. And so that way I don't have to waste my time to meet them. The concern that I have with that is that, what if they're on an insurance that's not very good? And so you could have met with them and really helped them out, but because you wanted to save your time, you decided to just give them a quick answer over the phone instead of meeting with them. And the way that I also look at this is like, man, this is an opportunity 2 years from now to get a lead, because you think that you're going to be the person that they call 2 years from now, just that you're that good in that 10-minute conversation where you tell them, no, this doesn't make sense. So I actually think that everyone should have that meeting, and then you should find out and say, hey, bring your plan. Let's find out what you actually have. And so that way we can help you make an educated decision about your healthcare future.
Yeah. I think a perfect example of that is I just dealt with a gentleman who's still working, turning 65, and was trying to figure out, whether or not he needed to enroll into Medicare. So after having that conversation, we ended up deciding that enrolling into Medicare, in this particular case, we went with a Medicare supplement. That's what made more sense for him. And he was going to, when it was all said and done, he was probably going to be paying about $25 or $30 more per month than he paid through his employer, but with a Medicare supplement plan G, right? Your Cadillac, if you will, compared to a high deductible plan, or a plan with a deductible and some out of pocket expenses.
Nowadays, like a $5,000 or $7,000 deductible, right? Like,
so that was the outcome of that scenario. But then he referred his colleague, a coworker of his, and had a conversation with her. And after asking all the right questions and going through the discovery, it turned out that it was actually going to make more sense for her to not enroll into Medicare. Two individuals that work for the exact same company, but we had a different outcome. And it just comes down to, again, making sure that we're asking the right questions and, giving the appropriate advice, but making sure that we've done the homework, we've done the research, we know the answers to these questions. One thing I want to mention real quick before we move into the next one is one of the follow-up questions that you usually get is, well, I heard I'm going to be penalized if I don't take Medicare. So that's where you can give them some peace of mind. And this is where it gets dangerous, right? Kind of like the story that you told at the opening. If you work for a large employer with 20 or more employees and you decide to delay Part B, you will not be, and later on down the road, 2 years from now, when you turn 67, you decide you want to enroll into Medicare Part B, you will not be penalized. And so it's important that you, again, address it. Even if they don't ask, I think it's important for us to bring it up in conversation just to give them a little bit of peace of mind. And I think at the end of the day, when you advise appropriately, correctly, and do what's best for the individual, it always leads to more. It always leads to the referrals. It always leads to more business. And so
spend time with that person, and then it could lead to something 2 years from now. That's the worst case scenario, right? Like worst case scenario, I get a sell two years from now. One of the key questions that you could ask is, let me ask you this. If that person ends up saying, you know what, I'm retiring actually at 65, I'm able to retire, and they decide to retire, the question now is, okay, well, you have retiree coverage. Do I have to sign up for Medicare Part B? And that changes the question completely, right? Like, so for Medicare Part B, if you are actively employed, and that's kind of the key here, is actively employed by a group of 20 or more employees, then you do not have to sign up for Medicare Part B. You can delay it. But if that is retiree coverage and you decide you want to delay it, and then a couple of years from now you decide to get it, then at that point you will have a late enrollment penalty. Yeah. So it's important to make that distinction. And so when you're having a conversation with that senior, that person turning 65, make sure to get that clarifying question.
Don't make the assumption, right? That I've got coverage elsewhere. Make sure you ask, is it coverage through your employer? Are you actively working? Or is it a retiree plan? Those are questions that we want to ask. And a lot of times it goes unasked, and it can lead to problems down the road.
Yeah. And one other key thing to know about this kind of conversation, and something to even, you're sitting in front of your client, something to make sure that they understand, is that they get 8 months from employment in to sign up for Medicare Part B. And so they need to make that call. Sometimes people will delay that phone call for various reasons and end up with a late enrollment penalty because they didn't do it, or having to wait until the general enrollment period to sign up because
they didn't do it within the 8 months, and then they decide, oh my gosh, I should probably get the ball rolling on this. And then it turns out, there's no open door, right? We talked about that on the last episode about having special enrollment periods. And so in this case, you've got 8 months. If you don't do it within those 8 months, then that door closes and you've got to look for another open door, and there may not be one.
There may not. Yeah, absolutely. So scenario number 2 is that you work for an employer, but then they actually have less than 20 employees. And so it changes because the rule changes, right? So who's the primary insurance?
In this situation with less than 20 employees, Medicare becomes the primary insurance.
And because of that, you can't delay Medicare Part B. You have to start it because Medicare is the primary for a small company. And so there's no option to delay it. And that's another part that agents get stuck on or give wrong information on that could cost people.
Yeah, it can lead to claims being denied. And here's the thing is, you may have an individual who's relatively healthy and they just did not enroll into Medicare when they turned 65. They work for this small employer. And then, 6-8 months later, they start actually having to use their insurance. Maybe they, had a fall and they had to get MRIs done, and maybe it was going to lead to some sort of surgery, and then they end up discovering, oh my gosh, like this is being denied. I don't understand why. Well, your Medicare is your primary insurance, and you don't have your Medicare Part A and B, and that can cause problems. But then it's down the road, and then again, is there an open door, right? Can I enroll into Medicare, or do I have to wait? If I have to wait, are there penalties? It's a domino effect, right? And so I think it's just super important to make sure that we're asking the right questions.
Yeah, and a lot of times when it's that close, when it's like, well, I do work for a small company, I don't know exactly how many employees we have. What do we say? Well, get with the plan sponsor, get with your employer, get with your HR department. If you work for a company that small, they might not have an HR department, right?
But you should have somebody that you should have access to, right?
Call the CEO.
Yeah.
Like, go just call somebody, get that answer as a matter of fact, because that could cost a lot of money, even more than a simple penalty that you go into the hospital, you didn't sign up for Medicare, and that's supposed to be the primary, that could cause you some major problems. So make sure that you get that taken care of. So scenario number 3 is VA coverage, and that's something that we talked about earlier. So
and
this one is is important because it is not creditable for Part B, and that's period, right? Mm-hmm. It's not, and it's, as we discussed before, it's a 10% Part B premium penalty per year for every year that you could have had it and chose not to. And the worst part about it, it's not like for 5 years. It's not like, okay, well, you pay that penalty for a year. That is for life. Yeah. And so it's super important. And then the part that I think that ends up getting agents lost is that it is creditable for Part D.
Right.
And so because of that, people don't have to get prescription drug coverage. Instead, they can use the VA coverage and not have a late enrollment penalty. And so a lot of times agents just get that confused, and then they end up putting people in a really bad situation, right? So
Part B, it is not creditable coverage for Part B. It is creditable coverage for Part D. And again, it until you actually understand it, or you've seen it or used it or been in that situation enough, it'll finally, get stuck in your head. But if you're not quite there yet, do some research, right? And get the answers to those questions, so that way you can give the right advice and how to have these conversations. Because that penalty, it's lifetime, like you said, but it's every month. It is a monthly penalty every single month for the rest of that person's life. And so you want to make sure that you're, at the end of the day, you're not the person that can potentially be responsible for something like that.
Yeah. And just another important thought on that is, like, why would somebody choose to get Part B and not get Part D? Can you think of a couple of scenarios where that might?
Yeah, I mean, I think the story that you told, right? If they need to go outside of the VA, so again, your VA coverage is only good inside those VA walls, unless, of course, they have
sometimes they refer you out,
contracts and whatnot, but you've got to go through their processes and their systems. But there are, I've seen situations where maybe a person has never had an issue, getting to the VA, and then they start to incur a lot of health issues, and it's now more difficult for them to get to the VA. So getting there can be, a difficult thing. Maybe they don't live so close, right? Maybe the closest VA clinic that they want access to is not very close. So distance can be a factor, maybe even wait times, right? If you live in a market where, you're in a big city and there are VA clinics all over the place, maybe that, that's okay. But think about your veterans who are in smaller towns or in other markets where the VA clinics are not as accessible. You've got to take that into consideration. And so I think, those are a couple of reasons why there's value in actually taking, the Medicare Part B, and then just diving a little bit deeper and taking it one step further. If it's a pain point, we see this all the time, veterans who are very healthy and don't have, a lot of issues, they have a difficult time grasping the fact that they should enroll, right? They're being told, hey, you should enroll into Part B. And they're thinking, why? If I go to the VA and I don't pay anything here, why should I take Part B and pay $200 a month for it, right? $202.90. And so that's where, as agents, right, we start to bring more value. Hey, look, I get that, and I understand your concerns now. Maybe it's not a problem now, but down the road, it might be. And then that's where we might start thinking about, those Medicare Advantage plans with a give back option. And that's where those types of plans can make sense for that individual, right? $200, there are plans in some markets that give you back $200 or close to it. And it's like, hey, let's kind of eliminate that expense, and we'll get you, we'll package it with this plan, and this is a good option for you. And you're helping, protect them and save them money along the way.
Yeah, or even worse, like that emergency situation where you're out, your heart starts hurting. They call 911, and you take an ambulance somewhere, right? Like it there's a lot of reasons to get it, and there's a lot of. I believe now that the VA is even recommending that people sign up for Medicare, but not for an Advantage plan, but for Medicare.
For Medicare,
yeah. So. On to the next is TRICARE and TRICARE for Life. Will you make the distinction real quick between TRICARE and TRICARE for Life?
Yeah, pretty simple. TRICARE is for those who are not eligible for Medicare, and then there's TRICARE for Life that's for people who are eligible for Medicare. So when you're looking at it, if you have TRICARE for Life, that means that you have Medicare A and B.
Right. So you do have to sign up for it. If you have TRICARE for Life, you have to sign up for it.
Right. So if somebody calls you and they're approaching the age of 65 and they tell you, hey, I'm turning 65 later this year, I've got TRICARE. Do I need to enroll into Medicare? So the response should look something like, yes, you do, because it's going to convert to TRICARE for Life. So they require you to enroll into Medicare, and then it will then convert to TRICARE for Life.
Okay, yeah. And so what's the exception there?
The exception is if maybe they have a spouse who is active duty, then they may be able to delay their enrollment into Medicare Part B. But outside of that, if you have TRICARE and you qualify for, again, assuming you qualify for Medicare, you have to, and you are required to enroll into both A and B.
Yeah, let's real quick talk about, and a lot of agents have very different opinions on whether or not someone with TRICARE for Life should ever go on an Advantage plan. Yeah. Why don't you give just your quick take on it?
Yeah. So the way I usually look at it is if a member has TRICARE for Life and they're considering enrollment into a Medicare Advantage plan, they are now going to be subject to the network rules of that Medicare Advantage plan. So so usually you want to go PPO, and if their doctors are all in the network, then usually I'm clear to move forward, right? We can continue the conversation about considering moving into a Medicare Advantage plan. But if doctors are not in network and the member wants to continue to have access to that particular provider, then it likely doesn't make sense to go with a Medicare Advantage plan. Well, why not, right? Well, the reason is because with TRICARE for Life, they have access to that doctor now, and they don't pay anything, to see that doctor. You're going to move them onto a Medicare Advantage plan with an out-of-network provider, and they most likely are going to be subject to some out-of-pocket expenses. So it almost feels like you're doing them a disservice by enrolling them into an Advantage plan in that case.
Yeah, and I think that you want to have a conversation, an actual, real conversation with every person that you talk to. It's not just like a yes or no. With TRICARE for Life and choosing a Medicare Advantage plan, there are situations where it makes a lot of sense, even if they see a doctor that's not in network. And let me just tell you, so I've talked to people who did not care about which doctor that they go to. All they wanted is to not have to pay for their gym membership.
Right.
Right. Like that. And they're just like, I don't care. I'll go to any doctor. And if they have that kind of attitude where, the network doesn't matter, there's not, other than, and the other conversation you want to have is are you traveling outside of the U.S.? Because TRICARE does give you coverage outside of the U.S., whereas, with an Advantage plan, it's very limited coverage near the U.S. border. So you want to have that full conversation. But again, it's a full conversation. All right, so on to the next scenario real quick. COBRA. So this is a confusing one for agents also, and thankfully it's not as bad as it used to be, but there was a time when the general enrollment period ran from January 1st through March 31st. Mm-hmm. It was the only time you could sign up for Medicare, and
if you didn't have
it, right, and you would sign up for it, and it would go into effect July 1st. So if somebody lost their coverage in August, they're in a situation that could really, really put them in trouble. But let's talk real quick about COBRA. So first of all, it's not creditable for Medicare purposes. And so you have this 8-month SEP that starts when you leave an employer, and it's that 8 months doesn't start when COBRA ends. That's when a lot of people think, oh, I need to start looking into this. Immediately after, what I would tell someone is if you leave an employer, you really need to immediately, I would sign up for Medicare Part B immediately, but you have that 8-month window. But a lot of times people get that 6 months of COBRA, or it really was putting people into 18 months of COBRA.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is if you go 18 months on COBRA, that means you went those first 8 months that you have to sign up for Medicare Part B, and really you've got 10 months where you chose not to get Medicare, and it could put you in, in a tough situation where you have a late enrollment penalty.
Yeah, because that 18-month penalty could come to an end in August, like you said, right? Here we are, August, my 18 months is up with COBRA. Okay, now I've got to go ahead and enroll into Medicare, and there's no enrollment period. You don't have a special enrollment period because you only had 8 months from the time that your employer coverage ended. And we see this a lot. I feel like it's more common now than it used to be. People get onto COBRA, and I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like I see this a lot where people are getting onto COBRA and they're getting it at no cost, where usually we know, you and I know COBRA is very expensive coverage when you're paying for it. And I don't know why this is becoming more of a common thing, but they're getting the COBRA at no cost. So from a financial standpoint, as that individual, 18 months of no cost insurance, that sounds great to me, which it is. There's real value in that. But again, that's where it's our job to educate these seniors and letting them know, hey, look, I know you've got COBRA for the next 18 months, but that 18-month clock is going to end in August. But you only have 8 months to enroll into Medicare. And if you don't do that within these 8 months, once that 18-month clock comes and it's August, you will not have the ability, you will not have what they call a special enrollment period to enroll into Medicare at that time. And then you're going to be in a situation where you're going to have to wait until the general enrollment period. You're going to have to wait until after the new year to enroll into coverage. So you could go potentially, 4, 5, 6 months without coverage. So I understand that your COBRA doesn't cost you anything now, and that's great. And then, like I said, there's real value in that, but you've got to enroll into Medicare within 8 months from the time that your employment ended or your coverage ended. So and then we get strategic, right? All right, when did your employment end? When did your coverage end? It ended in May. All right, well then let's wait, maybe 7 months. And then at the 7th month, we'll go ahead and enroll into Medicare. So that way you're not paying the Medicare premium for those first 7 months, but the furthest that you can take this thing is up to 8 months. And so we definitely want to enroll you then. And then we go from there.
Yeah. I mean, this is another one of those situations where we can really get people in trouble. So agents have to know this. So I think just take the time to learn the information, take the time, listen to this podcast, save it, and make sure that you come back to it, that you know this information, because this isn't something that's, you don't see this on your annual certification.
Right.
This is something you kind of learn once and then you just got to know, right? And so a lot of agents don't.
And the thing is, our seniors don't know this, right? The people that we're working with, for the most part, I want to say the majority of these scenarios that I've ran into, they're completely unaware of it when I bring it up to them. And when I start to educate them on it, they're like, wow, I didn't know that. I'm glad you told me that, because I was planning on going 18 months. I was going to take this thing all the way to the end. So super, super valuable, very important, but also very valuable from our point of view, right? And then again, that just makes you look like this guy knows what he's doing, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to lead to just more, right? Like there's more, it goes deeper than this. This is going to lead to, they now have all the confidence in you and all the trust, and they're going to trust whatever recommendation and advice that you give them. But in addition to that, right, they're going to start referring people over to you. And that's where you really start to find success in this industry and in this business. So it's more than just knowing this, right?
Yeah. There's
a lot more to it. When you bring that type of value to individuals, they see that, they recognize that, and they appreciate it, and they refer.
Yeah, and I think that this is just kind of like an extra that I'll say that's not really connected to this podcast. But man, if you are doing Facebook advertising and targeted marketing, or not really targeted, but doing marketing toward people that are on Medicare, this could be one of the things that you say is, did you know that there are people who make one mistake or get told by an agent that doesn't have enough experience that they don't have to have this coverage, and then they end up paying a 1 year late enrollment penalty for the rest of their life? Speak with me. I can get you the right information. So all the information that you collect, use it so that way you can grow your book of business by doing that. So on to the next one. This is one that's kind of frustrating as an agent, because you see it a lot where people, and it's changing now, but people were on marketplace coverage paying $15 a month for it. And they're like, man, this is the best coverage in the world. What's the deductible? Like $600 or $500
or less,
right? And they're like, I don't have a deductible. I'm paying $15 a month. I'm going to go ahead and stick with my insurance, and them not fully understanding, wait, you can't do that, right?
Right. Well, here's the thing: is it's not considered creditable coverage.
Right.
So if you age into Medicare and you're now eligible for Medicare, and if you, let's just say for whatever reason you decide to keep your marketplace plan, it is not considered creditable coverage. So if you go 2 or 3 years on this and stay on this ACA plan, and then down the road, it finally gets so expensive that you're like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and get onto Medicare. You're now subject to those penalties first, right? But secondly, the subsidies, right? If somebody tells you they're paying, and I was just in this situation recently, I met with somebody who's turning 65 and said, well, I don't think I want to take Medicare because I don't pay anything for my insurance right now. I'm like, well, where do you, again, comes down to asking all the right questions and working through it. In the discovery, turns out this person is on an ACA plan, and they're still paying no premium for their ACA plan. It's like, well, here's the thing, and you'll learn this. If you don't know this, you can do some research on it and some reading on it. But if you are now eligible for Medicare, and you have your ACA plan at no cost, that means you are getting subsidy discounts, right? You're getting it discounted. You are no longer eligible for those subsidies once you become eligible for Medicare. So that zero premium plan that you're on sounds great right now, but the reality is that the cost of that plan probably looks something more like $300, $400, $500 a month. So you can keep that plan, but at the full price of $400 a month, or you can enroll into Medicare, which is $200 a month. And that's when it starts to, make sense for them.
Well, and sometimes the annoying part about it, and there's something else to share, is like, if they don't catch it, like this, you end up paying it back in your tax return.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Like, so you're
think they're beating the system, right?
Yeah. and then you're expecting like a $2,000 return, and now you owe $1,000,
right?
Instead of getting that $2,000 return.
It's a big swing.
Yeah, you've these are things that you've got to know, and so again, as an agent, like obviously, like if you're an agent that does not deal in ACA business, you're like, no, I don't touch ACA business. You still got to know this kind of thing. Yeah. So that way, our goal here, and really the goal of this podcast, right, is to put agents in a position where they can go into meetings with seniors and be able to give them the right information and direct them the right way. And we're educators. We're people who end up, that's how we get our business, is by helping seniors find the right plan for them or get the right information. We educate them, and then hopefully they build some trust and they choose to go with us. So,
right.
Hey, so real quick, we're getting close to wrapping up. Let's go real quick with maybe 5 questions that you can ask during that meeting, right? So, one, obviously this is the easy one. Are you currently working? Right. So if you get that phone call and someone says, yeah, I wanted your help for Medicare, you've got to find out, well, so are you still working? And then if the answer is no, then they need Medicare now, right? Like that makes sense. That's an easy one. But next is, where does your health insurance come from? If it's an employer or group or VA, TRICARE, you're wanting to find out what it is in order to figure out everything that we just talked about, like how do we move on to, whether or not you need it. And then if they're like, yeah, I do work and I have an employer, then we've got to find out how many employees are at the company. That's a super important question here. And then the next question would be, is your coverage through your current job, your spouse's current job, or a former employer? And that's going to help us figure out if it's active employment or if it's a retiree distinction. And then, have you started receiving Social Security benefits? Because sometimes that's a surprise. It turns out that they were on disability and they did start receiving, or they just chose to receive it early, right? And they can do that. And another one I would just throw in there is a super important thing is like, well, what kind of coverage do you have? Do you have like a $7,500 deductible and you pay $500 a month for that insurance? If that's the case, I bet I could find you something much better, put you in a much better situation. So
Bonus question. I got one more too to
Yeah.
throw in there. Any dependents? Do you have any dependents on your current? If they currently have insurance, are there any dependents on there, and what does their situation look like? So that's another key question that you want to ask.
Yeah, that's huge actually. And it was whether or not they decide, like maybe they do have terrible group health insurance, but they have a spouse that's 10 years younger than them. They're going to stay on that insurance, right? Like that's the right move, unless they wanted to go to the ACA route.
Marketplace.
Yeah. So that's all we really wanted to cover today. We just want to make sure, again, our goal is to help agents to get more information, to understand, to educate themselves, so that way you can do a good job of educating seniors. So. Well, I want to remind everybody, if you ever have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to us on our Instagram, on our YouTube, on our Facebook page. We are available. We will write you back. We want to be a part of the agent community. We've been doing this. I've been doing it for 20 years, Oscar. 13 years. We know what we're doing. We know how to be successful. We have a team of agents that are very successful in doing what they do. We know how to help agents to be successful. So at some point, as you've seen us do in the past, we are going to answer questions that come into us, on whether they come in through Instagram or any other way. So don't hesitate to send us your questions. Anything that you'd like us to cover, we'd be happy to do it. So until next time.